Alright, turn this to landscape. I think it'll give a better picture. As you can see, I've already started laying things out. And as you can see, if you didn't notice the outside, this is the next day from the last video I made, and this is springtime in the Rocky Mountains. It is almost April, and we're in the middle of a full-out blizzard. So yeah, great fun. Anyway, I've started laying out my edge tiles. My corners are nice and set up. I mean, I know you can't tell in the video, but I am putting a lot of pressure on that. So you can see that that glue right there, that stuff really holds. I wanted to talk a little bit more about this underlayment I used, the particle board. You know, you can use plywood. I like the particle board because it's generally cheaper than 3/4 inch plywood, and on top of that, it's dimensionally stable because it's basically a bunch of sawdust and wood fibers left over from milling lumber and plywood and whatnot, and it's put together, it's glued together. You're not going to get expansion and contraction with different temperature variations and humidity variations. The only drawback to this stuff here is that if it gets wet, you will ruin it. And so, you know, you might say, well, that you don't want to use that on a countertop because it might get wet. No, you do a really good job on your tile installation and grout, and it'll never get wet. The only possibility where it'll get wet is if you don't seal around your sink and the water gets underneath there, and it'll get on your particle board here. And you can get the industrial grade particle board, which is a little bit more water resistant. But like I said, you know, I'm economizing on this job. You know, that's why, as I explained, I got the gaps back in there, but we'll go ahead and tile over that and you'll never even know. When I installed this, another reason I like doing this is because I've got a really stable base. Basically, I've got this doubled up all the way around instead of just a single sheet in the middle with spacers to go on top of the on top of your countertops there. And when I laid this out, all my joints are offset. So when I laid these pieces in, I put the edges where these cabinets meet. That way the edge is supported really well, the end, and it's not going to sag. And then I laid a full sheet this way. Okay, and then when I put my second sheet on top, I did the exact opposite. I staggered my joints. You know, underneath this one here, actually I went to right here with this full sheet on the bottom. Get this better on the camera. And then this piece under here is full across, and then when I went on top, I staggered my joints. So that'll give me a lot more stability. And when I was tearing out the old countertop, come to find out they just floated it on top of these cabinets. And that was another problem I had. I had a problem with the old cabinet coming away from the walls and whatnot. Well, the stupid bastards never fastened it to the counter or to the cabinet bases. And in the corner, I'm not going to get underneath there and crawl, but here's your base cabinet for your sink, and you can see the seams here, right there, and then this is a separate unit by itself. In each corner, you've got what's called a gusset. It's basically just a triangular shaped piece of wood, and they're fastened in the corners. And then what that's designed for is that you can go underneath, and when you lay your countertop on, underneath here, you can run a screw up into the bottom of it. And it's in each four corners. I might be able to get a picture. See, that's what I'm talking about right there. And each one of these units, these are all separate units, these cabinet units, here's another seam, That's just a spacer to make up for that space between the cabinets. It's just a piece of wood, and then your other unit goes this way. But basically, in each one of these separate cabinet units, there's those gussets, and then you just, like I said, you run your screw up underneath there to fasten your countertop down. Now that I've started my layout, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make these 45-degree cuts. That's going to be by far the most difficult part. Again, like I said, I'm using my cell phone. I don't have a tripod or nothing like that. So I'm going to go ahead and make those cuts and get these installed. And then later on, if I've got extra tile, I'll do my best to show you how to make those 45-degree cuts on a tile saw. And I'm using I know it's on the floor right now, but I'm just using a basic tile saw. I think it's got a 7-inch blade. I've got a bigger unit. I just don't feel like lugging it around. It's a freestanding with a 10-inch, I think it's a 10 or a 12-inch blade on it. But basically, this is what you can buy fairly cheaply. I use it a lot, so I went with a higher quality. It's a rigid tile saw, but you can buy a cheap one or better yet, if you're just doing one job, just go ahead and rent one. Most hardware stores, I don't know if Home Depot rents tools or not, but a lot of places don't rent tools. Just call around. I'm sure you'll find a place that does rentals. I think you know, I live in a small town, and we've got 2 places that do rentals, tool rentals. So it can be found. And when I laid my tiles out, I kind of half-assed, tried to lay them out in a pleasing manner, because you can see the pattern on these is random, but I did try to match tiles up so that they look like they kind of go together, like that. And they're just sitting there right now. I taped them in place. I use this blue painter's tape. You can use duct tape, well, actually masking tape, duct tape. It's okay if you're only going to use it for a few hours, but if you leave that duct tape on there too long, that glue is going to start separating from the tape, and when you go to peel it, you're going to have glue residue, which you can't clean off. But and the reason I'm on the next day is I messed up. Well, I knew I'd messed up, and when I bought these tiles, like I said, it was on clearance sale, and these chair rails, I needed 34 of them, but the Home Depot I went to only had 32, so I got what I could. And then yesterday I had to run to another Home Depot, and I live in Wyoming, and so I'm pretty much equidistant between 2 Home Depots, and it's 130 miles one way to a Home Depot where I live. So I went there yesterday so I could beat this. I didn't want to get stuck in this. And so, you know, let that be a lesson to you. I'll show you the bathroom real quick. Please excuse the mess, but when I did the bathroom, I changed my configuration, and I had enough tile. This floor tile here is 12 by 12 tile to do the floor and have some extra, because I did the baseboard and ceramic top, because it's all watertight now. You know, with the grout on top of it and whatnot, and you'll never even have to caulk around that tub. That grout is sealed. You know, everything is sealed. But I changed my configuration. I was looking at it, and I was just gonna be too much white tile on the wall. So I said, well, let me go ahead and use some of that floor tile and do a couple bands in the floor tile just to break that white up. And when I did, well, I kind of considered that when I was buying the tile, but I ran short. I ran like 5 pieces short. Now, that's the one thing you don't want to do. And the reason for that is that when I went back a week later to get some more of this floor tile, they had the same name, brand, the same design name and everything, but it was a different shade code. It was a different run of tile from the factory, and the shade code was different, and it did not match. Even though all the names, the UPC code and everything else said the same, right here, that's the shade code. And this stuff is Sandy Beach. This is part Plage, or whatever you want to call it. That's part of the run, the name of this particular tile. The color code, or the design code's FK98 Sandy Beach. UPC is different, but right there, that shade code, when you're buying, even when you're buying tile, the initial tile, you want to make sure your shade codes are the same, okay, on all your boxes, because if not, you're going to wind up with mismatched tile. And that's going to be a real bummer when you go to install this and you start laying tile, especially if you've already didn't notice it before you put your your mortar down, and you're already laying tile, and all of a sudden you step back and you get done with the job and you're looking at it and you're like, damn, this tile's not matching. So when you're buying your tile, always check your shade code. Always buy enough for the job, and in fact, you want to figure about 15% extra. So if you're doing a 50 square foot job, then you want to figure 10% of that would be an extra 5 square feet, and then half of that again would be 2.5. So you want an extra 7.5 square feet minimum when you're doing these tiles, because when you start doing your cuts to fit in the corners and along the edges and whatnot, sometimes you can get lucky and you can get 2 pieces out of that, or you can get your one piece there and then use your extra piece over here on this side. But it doesn't always work out like that, so you'll wind up with a bunch of remnants that, you know, you can try to use them in certain spots, but in the end you're going to wind up with a lot of scrap, like this stuff down here. So that's why you want to go ahead and always make sure you have plenty for your job. Yeah, you'll have a few tiles left over. Put them up on a shelf and keep them just in case, you know, somebody drops something. You know, ceramic tile is great, but it is brittle. And a lot of times it'll absorb a lot of punishment, but, you know, I've seen people that have dropped, you know, cast iron pots or cast iron pans on a floor tile, and it'll shatter it. So it's good to have a few extras anyway. Like I said, this house will be for sale, so I'll leave the extras up there in that closet up there. I'll also leave all the information for the paint, color code, you know, where I got it and whatnot. That way, if they ever need to touch it up and they don't want to repaint the whole place, they'll have that information as well, the new owners. Another thing about this tile here, I touched on it. Whenever I do a floor tile, I always use thin set mortar with the acrylic. I'm stepping on trash and I don't have it here anymore, but I always use a thin set mortar with it, the acrylic liquid. You know, you can use thin set in water, but I like using that acrylic because once it dries, it's pretty much impervious to water. And I could do the same thing here. You know, when you're doing a tile installation, especially on a floor, you want to use what's called cement board. And what that does, especially over your subfloor, like this here, this is not going to be ceramic, by the way. This is going to be a vinyl tile. But whenever you're doing an installation of ceramic tile, you want to do it over a cement board, or if it's not over concrete. If you're doing over a wood floor, not concrete, then you want to use something like this screwed down to your subfloor, and then put your tile, or put your thin set mortar down, and then your tile. And you can do the same thing on a countertop. I don't think it's necessary on a countertop, especially when you're using dimensionally stable particle board like this. And you can use thin set mortar. But again, like I said, this stuff here, that's what I put that wall tile on with in the shower over drywall or sheetrock, however you want to call it. And that stuff, you know, it'll hold. It's a champ, and it's going to do just fine here as well. The advantage of this over thin set is that once you mix thin set, you've got a very limited time that you can work with it before it starts to thicken up and actually harden. You got to mix it, which is a pain in the butt. So you know, in this case, I'm just going to go with this Acrylic Pro ceramic tile adhesive, and it's going to work just fine. So basically that's it. And for this video, you know, once I get the cuts made and start and do the installation, I'll come back to that and we'll talk more about our layout of the countertop tile.